good.
Okay. Welcome to another worship podcast, our very first episode. We're very excited to be launching this. Yes, very excited. We are in our offices right now, currently. We've made somewhat of a studio out of this. But yes, my name is Faith Schneider. I'm the worship pastor here. And to my left is my brother,
Ben
Schneider. Yeah.
We just got this nice little board here. Got a couple things going on.
Yeah, all of them. All the sounds.
Ooh. And also this.
That's actually the only thing Ben's
going to be doing. Oh. Is it off?
Wait.
Okay.
Let's. Wait, how about this?
What's this one?
Oh, that's actually
That's
pretty
actually
cool.
like an echoey.
Yeah. As long,
For our baby Christians. What about this?
Check one.
Okay, we've
Yeah.
had our fun.
We've had our fun. And that's it, guys. See you next episode. Oh my gosh. It's a miracle if we can get through this.
Yeah, so actually we've tried to do a couple of these already. And
A lot.
a couple things. This room is so hot.
Yeah.
And it's harder than it looks to do this.
Yeah.
So I guess the reason why we're starting a podcast called Another Worship Podcast is because I was the worship pastor at the Harbor Church for 10 years. Right out of Bible college, I moved back from Dallas, Texas, back to Long Island, and was the worship pastor here at this awesome church. And then Faith came on as an intern 2 years ago, and then last year she became the worship pastor. And so if I just left it at that, it would sound like you just took my job and threw me out.
I basically did.
And so I'm here now. So I'm one of the staff pastors here, one of the associate pastors, and Faith is oversees our awesome worship ministry. And so the reason we started this podcast and called it Another Worship Podcast is because every year we'll kind of sit down. I'll sit down with Faith and we'll talk about like what her vision is for the worship team, and generally we'll do a project, or maybe we'll do like a music thing or something for our team building. And this year we were talking, and the idea of a podcast came up, and the reason it's called Another Worship Podcast is because there's so much material out there for like so many famous worship leaders and awesome ministries. And if you're a worship leader, I feel like it's such an awesome asset, like even way more than when I first started.
Yeah.
There's so many awesome, like I feel like really
Like
incredible
more content, you're saying?
Yeah, content and
yeah.
worship pastors who are accessible, that you can actually hear about, stuff that happens in their church. And so we called it Another Worship Podcast. Well, I guess do you want to say why, or kind of your heart
To
behind
add
that?
it to the list. No, yeah. Yeah, we wanted to start it because I think, just like Ben was saying, that there's so much content out there, but the beauty of being so connected to the local church, which I know all of those, all of those people are connected to the local church, but we wanted to kind of talk to and speak from the perspective of, being a local worship pastor, leading the same congregation weekly. And yeah, I mean, the average, I feel like we always talk about this, but the average size of the evangelical church in the U.S. is like, I thought it was 200 to 300, but you said it was like 65.
Yeah, she told me it was 200 to 300. Or she told me. You told me.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Who else is here? We were talking about this, and you were saying it's 200 to 300. And then I looked it up, and there was a study done in 2021 where churches, have shrunk, especially due to COVID, in terms of attendance. And the average evangelical Protestant church in the U.S. is 65 people.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I really thought it was more than that.
Yeah, it's a little sad.
It's very sad.
Yeah, it's sad.
So, if you don't go to church, go to church. No, but so we wanted to aim this like kind of an asset for our church too. So if you do attend our church, we wanted to, I guess, give language and I don't know if insight's the right word, but kind of tell you our heart for worship. And also, I think it's cool just to change it up as far as content wise. We always have like, the same stuff.
I think it's like twofold, like the purpose of this podcast, from what we were talking about. The first is, like we were saying, there's so many great churches, so many awesome ministries. But when you're talking to a worship community that is made up of churches where the average is, 65 people, or let's say even 200 or 300.
Right.
Sometimes there's like awesome biblical truth to pull out of that. There's incredible things that are super relatable. But I know, even as being a worship pastor for a long time, sometimes you go to conferences and they're amazing, awesome, so life-giving. But sometimes it is hard to relate in different ways and capacities. Sometimes you want to hear from someone who might be in more of an experience like yourself. And so in doing so, and in looking at different podcasts, we were thinking about, okay, what's a good niche to kind of like, outside of just our awesome, incredible local body, like to kind of cover. And I think we want to build a community for worship teams, worship pastors, worship leaders of the average church, of the local church, where we're gonna, I know Faith wants to cover just like a variety of subjects. And so yes, it's another worship podcast because there's about 30,000 different things, but more than just like doing a teaching. I think your heart really was more to like foster a community, like to build a community and an environment where we're going to have other, worship pastors, worship leaders on of other local expressions, some larger, some smaller, and just kind of talk about the Lord.
Yeah. And I think too, like being where we are, I think it's cool to hear from, like different regions, I guess. Like did we say where we are? We're based in Long Island, New York. If we didn't say, that's where we are. And I think that's also because, where you're planted, where God's put you, no matter like in the... It's like, do I not know how to talk? I'm telling you, this is insane. No, like, where God's planted you, there's like, if I was a worship pastor, in Utah, I'm gonna have a different perspective than a pastor in California or a worship pastor in. This doesn't matter. I don't know.
I mean, I guess what you're saying. No.
I actually was confident about this, and now it's going downhill.
I know what you're saying. You're saying it's like there's, obviously like your community, every community is different. Like being a worship, like again, I went to Bible school down in Dallas. I lived there for 6 years. The church community in Dallas is so different than Long Island in so many ways. Pros and cons.
I did the same thing. We went to the same Bible college.
I lived your life. But no, I get what you're saying. Yeah. It's like it's just different. It's different. It's different for everybody. You know what I mean? It's like you'll see the videos. Like I remember growing up seeing like the Hillsong United back in the day. Like they would do the DVDs, and you can like watch in this youth groups, just like everybody's worshiping, and you go out there and there's just all this passion and fervor, and then you go to your youth ministry, to lead worship in Long Island, New York, and I remember there was a youth camp we even did in Pennsylvania maybe 2 years ago, and we were worshiping, and like in the first session, like no kids they're just staring and it's like definitely more of a different denomination, it's kind of like Amish feeling, like they were very conservative and just kind of staring at us. But I remember the second session before we came out.
I remember them being of Norwegian descent.
Yeah. Very Norwegian. Yes, a lot of blonde hair, blue eyes.
Yes.
And we were about to go out on the in the next set, and the pastor comes out and he's like, "Hey, can you guys just make an announcement real quick? Can you ask the boys to stop touching all the girls' butts?"
I was at the altar. That.
At the altar.
No, they would have blankets. They would have blankets, and then
so inappropriate.
Girls.
It's no fear of God.
Yeah,
but
this generation.
Yes, and so I say that to say, it's not always. the Passion City out here. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
And
It's
it actually ended up being an awesome weekend and really incredible. But I think, and that's a camp story, but I mean, like, even in the local church experience, it's not always you go out there and it's just like, it's not always an environment that is super copacetic to just like an ease of let's all go for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think sometimes it is,
Yeah.
but I think sometimes it's good for, worship people to talk with other worship people when it can be, when there are challenges, and not to make it all about challenges, but
Yeah.
I don't even know what we're talking about.
It's all about challenges.
I guess a good question is and we're not going to do this every time, but just to kind of introduce ourselves. What brought you into the leading worship world? What was the thing that, I know, but do these three people out here know?
Talking to you guys. Well, it was, I started leading worship for a youth group, and that was like when we didn't have a youth band, so it was literally just me and piano. And then Ben was the worship pastor at the time, and he asked me to fill in for someone who called out. They were on pads. Remember that?
No.
Yeah, they were on pads, and that was when like someone played pads. So it was just like, wah, wah. Like, that was it. I was thrilled. I was so excited. And then he started scheduling me a lot on pads, and I hated it after a while. But no, in all seriousness,
As a kid, Faith would just she'd play pads and just pick one person in the church and just chew gum and stare at them.
Yeah. Actually, no, the worst was when mom was always in the front row. And when I would look at her, she'd go like this, smile, which made me even more infuriated. So, so that was how it all began. But there definitely was markers in those times where the Lord really, really, that's how I would connect with God, was through music. And I think also my love for the church, like just being, I think when you're young, like you don't really make the decision to follow God because you don't know him, but you know his presence, you know what it's like to be around his presence. And I just remember worship music, even as a kid, like we had an hour bus ride to our high school. It was literally so long. But I remember listening to secular music and then listening to, which it wasn't like anything explicit
Like
or
what?
anything.
Like, what'd you listen to?
That was like when, I don't know. I definitely would listen to like, I had an R&B stage, which was funny. Like I would listen to a lot of Beyonce before she got.
Is Beyonce R&B?
I don't know, actually.
But you like Beyonce?
Yeah, I would listen to her.
Like a lot of Beyonce?
No, not like a lot.
Only Beyonce.
I just remember that song "Without You" by Usher. I don't know when that came out, but I would listen to that a lot. I don't know why I like.
Wait,
that
Without You is what?
Without you, you. It doesn't matter. Anyways, that's kind of what I would really vibe to on the bus ride. But all that to say, I started to notice probably around like 15, 16, how worship music would really be the thermostat of my day. Like listening to secular stuff as opposed to listening to like filling my mind with Hillsong and Bethel, which is pretty much the only thing I would listen to. That was when really they were just putting out music, which is crazy to think because now it's like there's so many people putting out music. But so that's where my love for worship really began. And then I went away to Bible school to Christ for the Nations Institute, which I heard about it through my brother because he went. And
You mean me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. The one right here. Ben was a little bit difficult in high school. We won't go into that.
We all have a story.
Yeah, we all have a testimony. My little sister would actually cry whenever Ben would enter her room.
She was so happy to see me.
And so I'll never forget when you came back after your first semester. Mm-hmm. And Ben was like so different. It was weird. Like he was nice to us and you just were, I mean, the Lord really changed your life.
Totally.
And I saw that from, I guess I was maybe, I don't know, a freshman or sophomore at the time. And that was really what struck me about the school was if they can change my brother, they can change anyone. Just kidding. But also the DNA of worship at CFNI is very, very prevalent. Watching their videos, like the old school videos, something just really drew me to them. So did that and was able to work there after graduating, which was awesome. I feel like the world of worship really opened up. Made an actual decision to follow the Lord, and like an actual one, and then came back here. And during 2020, came to New York during 2020. So as a result, I've had the privilege of being able to worship in different spaces and see different local churches, especially in the Northeast. And I think my heart for this podcast really is to have a community for local worship pastors as well, like here, well, local and also not local. But I think sometimes I feel like also just being in ministry can sometimes feel lonely and a little bit like, I don't know if misunderstood is the word. That's probably not the word, but like just feeling like, okay, like, you know, being a part of the church and being part of the kingdom of God and building the kingdom of God, sometimes it can feel like there definitely is a cost to it, but there's also like a loneliness to it. And so I feel like being able to relate to people and worship leaders and worship pastors on that end is also our heart for this podcast as well. Also for our church family, if you're listening and you attend the Harbor Church, part of my heart too is to communicate, you know, why we do what we do on a Sunday, what worship looks like, the importance of it, and the value that it is. And especially, you know, I grew up here and being able to watch my parents worship. And I just think it's so powerful when the church comes together, you know, magnifying Jesus. And I think it's definitely no small thing. And so we're going to get more into that. But yeah, we want to just have this to be a community for those people that go to our church, also like worship pastors. And I think,
and also gas station people, strip malls,
road workers, all this stuff. No.
Want to say fast food, restaurants, honestly, anything.
Really, wherever you find yourself.
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think.
Was I not clear just then?
Yeah, you were clear. You want everyone.
Yeah, everyone and anyone.
Yeah. So I think that when we were talking about this, like the purpose of the podcast being, you know, a place that's relatable, a place that is fostering a good community of for both church people, for worship people, but also. Maybe you're just curious about church. Maybe we get a lot of people who watch our stream who maybe are watching it for the first time, and maybe you're just curious about like what this whole thing is. I mean,
who's the girl screaming into the microphone? It's
what?
Me.
Yeah. Like on a Sunday, you mean?
Yeah. When else?
Yeah. Scream church. But I think also like if you just happen to tune into our video for that, like we want, I feel like one of the biggest draws to our church has been, you know, from when it comes to the unsaved, like on Long Island specifically, like it's the general experience is Roman Catholic. So it's like when it comes to music or any sort of like, I guess a high quality production like setup. Production is not the best word to use, but using it in a secular sense.
Right.
I think that's what has brought a lot of people to our church is the fact that you know, just striving to do things with excellence and with good musicianship, which I think that's a whole nother podcast about. Just like musicianship and excellence is a biblical trait.
Yeah,
it's a godly trait.
Yeah,
and I think that. So if you stumbled on the podcast or through just our church YouTube or whatever, man, we're just so happy that you're watching, and we would love for you to stick around and be a part of it. So,
do you want to tell the people about yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of did a little bit, but basic. Okay, well, I'll do it again. Anyway, so I actually got saved really. Well, I got saved at a young age, I would say. Well, I would back all that up. I encountered God at a young age. I made a decision to follow Jesus in college down in Dallas, Texas, and the Lord did just a remarkable work in my life, and just so grateful, like changed my life forever. And then I had gone into another college from CFNI and graduated from there, and it was like a month before I graduated that the pastor of this church, Pastor Mike, called me, and at the time it was just him and his son Scott, who's now our lead pastor. And Scott was the youth pastor at the time, and just said, "Hey, I don't know if you have any plans or anything, but I'd love to have you be a part of our church and come on staff." And I just said, I felt like it was the right thing, and I moved here.
Like you always knew you were going to come back to New York, though, right?
I always knew I was going to come back to New York. I didn't know that I'd come back here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was a time at the end of my Bible school experience where I thought I'd be in Dallas for quite some time. But I did always know, since I was down there, I've always had a heart for what the Lord is doing on the island. And so yeah. And then our church was a much, much different church. Our church at that time was probably half the size, maybe a quarter of the size even. Very traditional experience. I mean, I guess comparatively with most churches, it was ahead where like there was like we were doing vineyard stuff. We had some awesome worship leaders. But in comparison to what I had just experienced, it was it had a ways to go on a technical level. And so I for the next decade kind of just the Lord gave me a vision for the worship team. I had incredible leaders, and then even the worship team, and what has happened in our church is due to the grace of God, and then the empowering of I've always had awesome people to co-labor with. The worship team would not be what it is without Lindsay, our oldest sister. She was on staff, is on staff, but she was on staff in a worship capacity with me for a while. And then people like Vin Chidkowski and even Rulo, and so many people that have helped over the years. So
definitely gonna have Rulo on the podcast.
Yes, a podcast with Rulo. So I moved back worship pastor for 10 years, and in the midst of being the worship pastor here, I met my beautiful wife, Alyssa, and I got married about 2 years ago, and she is incredible and amazing. I'd love to have her on.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I would love to have her on.
It's happening, Alyssa.
Yes, she is awesome, and I think that actually has brought a whole nother side of worship.
Yeah. Wait, what do you mean?
in the sense of, and without getting too deep into it, I feel like working at a church, being single for a chunk of that time.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot to work at a church. It's a lot of dealing with people in the best ways and some difficult ways. But I think it's one thing you go to a church, an event, a service, whatever, and or a small group, you pour your heart and soul into it. It's different when you're a leader, no matter what anyone says. It's different, and you pour everything into it, and then you can always go home. And I've lived in a house with friends. I've lived in an apartment by myself before, and when you go home, it's really easy just to disconnect.
Yeah.
And you don't really have to talk anymore. And I felt like marriage for me brought a whole new level of authenticity or opportunity to be more authentically like Jesus.
Yeah.
Because you're going home to serve someone else. And that now there's also it's your best friend. It is all the amazing, beautiful things.
Get it, Ben. It sounds amazing.
No, it's incredible. But also, I do feel like you need the Holy Spirit even more.
Yeah.
In my experience, because it's not like you could put something on and just kind of disconnect.
That's exactly what I do.
And sometimes you could do that with someone, and that's awesome. But I think for me, it's been marriage has just been awesome in terms of so fun, so incredible, but also changes your worship experience and dependency on the Holy Spirit in a whole new way. And then recently, this last year, the Lord kind of has been leading both Alyssa, my wife, and I into a new place, and we transitioned into more of teaching role here at the church and just kind of oversight into things, and was able to give Faith the opportunity to, hey, take this team to a whole nother level, which you have done. And I think it's been awesome to kind of observe that. So, but I'm pumped when you said that this is something that you were passionate about.
Yeah.
I've had so many relationships with other worship pastors over the years here, and I'm so pumped to have them in and to talk to other people from across the country and just have a space to actually talk without it. I think the reason Another Worship Podcast is a good title because there's not like a pointed place in the discussion, and it doesn't have to be so highly produced or anything. It's more of just a place of conversation where we could actually talk about church stuff and real life stuff.
I think too, a big reason why I wanted to start this too is for people, if you're not in ministry, like talking to those people. There was we have a Tuesday night younger women Bible study, and then we have a Thursday morning.
That's the wrong one.
No, that was the right one.
No, that was the right one. Okay.
I'm going to backtrack. We're going to backtrack. But another reason why I wanted to do this podcast is, first off, I feel like when you're a worship leader, you are kind of limited to, like, the role you have on a Sunday is to sing, which is awesome. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's hard to communicate your heart. Like, I remember in Bible school, like, no one liked the worship leader that was like always talking, like there'd be the worship leader that would like sing a song, give a short like 5-minute sermon, and then and that's like super annoying. But I think my heart too is to have it to be a space to teach on worship, and we have women's Bible studies here, and I gave a short little teaching on just like the practical things of why we raise our hands and why it's important to worship with the corporate body. And there was a couple when that came up to me, like you said, a lot of people from our church come from maybe a Roman Catholic background. This woman came up to me and she was just like, I just didn't know I could do that.
Wow.
Which was crazy because she was like, it was kind of discouraged. And actually, I don't know if she was raised Catholic, so I can't say that, but it was discouraged for her. And it was just, I was like, wow. And I think for people like us who were raised in church and then you go, I mean, it's like, I've seen my parents worship since I was young. I've seen people lift their hand. It was very normal. And then Bible school is just like so much passion.
Oh yeah.
So I think when you transition out of that season and you're placed in a community that's not everyone's background, it's really powerful when you can communicate that. And I think it does bring freedom and breakthrough for people who might not know the power of their own worship personally, but then also their worship in a corporate setting. So I just want to put that in there too. It's for everybody. This podcast is really for everybody. But yeah, so that's a little bit about us and why we want to do this podcast. Yeah, so that is basically a gist of why we exist, why we want to do this. And in the coming episodes, we're going to be I said that super like with a weird accent. Anyways, in the coming episodes, we're going to be covering different things like leadership, creating culture, anointing versus gifting. That seems a little intense. I'm gonna take it back. We're gonna take it back.
We also want to hear, if you're watching this and if you're from our church even and you're watching, we would love to get topics from you guys. So if there's something that you specifically want to, even on a practical level, I remember as a worship pastor, sometimes my questions were just like track related. You know what I mean? Like, how do you just like do this or that or that? And honestly, we have a ceiling on that too. But we're going to cover a multitude of subjects and also have awesome guests in and sharing some of the best experiences, some of the worst experiences.
Mm-hmm. Talking about leadership.
Yeah, and it's going to be awesome. So,
if they want to submit their questions.
Well, you just leave a comment.
Oh, leave a comment, right?
Yes.
Drop a comment below.
Drop a comment. You can like the video. You can share the video.
If you want one of us to do something embarrassing.
What? It becomes like the Twilight Zone.
Just a show.
Yeah.
Yep. So that is the first episode of Another Worship Podcast. And we are so excited for the next one. We hope you can tune in. We hope that it was beneficial to you. And so definitely stay tuned for our next one. We're going to have some guests on. We're super excited. So follow us on our Instagram accounts, which is The Harbor Worship and at The Harbor LI. Also, we'll be posting this to our YouTube, The Harbor Worship YouTube channel,
Yeah,
right?
so subscribe to our YouTube.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share with your friends, wherever
Awesome.
you find yourself right now. And we'll see you next time.